I'll
Mm-hmm.
press it. Three, two, one, go.
All right. Can y'all hear me? If you guys are online, welcome to another episode of Subtle Asian Voices, guys. My name is Daphne, and today we're going to go over our reflections on what's going on with coronavirus this past year. Um, so if you guys haven't already, please go ahead and hit that like, subscribe button down below. We would love for you guys to keep following us so that way you guys won't miss an episode. And so let's get started. So let's introduce ourselves all over again, guys. You know where I'm at. I'm Daphne. I'm in Los Angeles, California. It's been a little bit, but living out the year almost out here, and it will be today's what, the 6th? So 8 more days until LA's official lockdown. Crazy, right?
Wow, yeah, that has been. Time flies, I feel like. But yeah, and I'm Norman from Miami. Things are still pretty wild here, I guess, but it's been a long time. I think so. Yeah, how you guys been with the COVID thing?
Jasmine, Tampa, Florida. You know, we keep things interesting here in Florida. So it's been a interesting year, a lot to unpack. But nice to be back here and talk with you guys.
My name is Tiffany. I'm calling from just outside of Washington, D.C. And to be honest, I feel like you may have heard people say like we're just living through a pandemic, and we're literally living through a pandemic because stores are open, they're not open in the same capacity. But it really is crazy that it's been almost a year that we've been living this way, especially when I remember we shut down, people were saying like, oh, we'll just shut down for a couple months and then we'll be good. A couple of months turned into a year plus.
Yeah.
It will be a year plus. So,
Ooh.
yeah.
Seriously. It's been a really, really hard year, guys. I don't know about you, but COVID has been hard. Like, so as a super extrovert, I'm the kind of person who like loves being around people, right? And so when everything first shut down, I was like, "Oh, you can't see your friends anymore." And I was like, "What?" And then not to mention, like, it was literally for my birthday. I was gonna celebrate with a bunch of friends at like a brewery out here, and then they were like, "Oh, everything's shut down." I was like, "No." And then that was before all like the social distancing stuff happened. So no one really thought about going out for picnics or like going outdoors together or like staying masked and doing all that stuff. So it was kind of like everything came crashing down super fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like 1 minute I'm working in the office, and the next day I packed up all my stuff from the office and just put everything into my house. I was like, whoa, this is gonna be different. And yeah,
Yeah, I would say like I'm on the other end with Daphne because I'm an introvert. So it was like nice. I'm one of those people who's like, oh, cancel plans. Yay, let's party at home. But you know, really quickly that got old. I work for myself. And so you know, there wasn't too much of a shift from when the lockdown happened and I got to work from home because that's essentially what I did anyways. But with everybody else being home, because I had 3 roommates plus because I live with my boyfriend. So it was a packed house. I mean, that really quickly, I would say after the first month, you could start to feel the space just shrinking around you. But yeah, it's been a weird, I would say kind of a weird paradox because when I say Florida keeps it interesting, we've been wide open for months. So, you know, for those of us who are continuing to social distance, wear masks, you know, stay home whenever possible. It's weird driving around for the last couple of months and you see the stores are packed again. You see the bars and the restaurants are packed and you're like, wait a minute, are we out of this thing? No, you know? And so trying to find a balance mentally between like where we actually are and where people want, you know, to come back to has been challenging. I would say more so in the last couple of months because again, people are at their peak of I'm tired of staying home. I want to go out. I want to live my life again, but you know, at what risk? So it's been weird down here in Florida.
I think there's a balance too because everyone has their own situation. They have their own like comfort thresholds too. I remember at the very beginning, you know, I felt guilty for being a little more comfortable than some other friends. And I knew the risks that were involved with what I was doing. And then now I feel like it's a little more accepted to be out, but still like responsible. So I think people's mindsets have definitely shifted, mine included. And I think it also ties back to like your living situation, right? Like I don't live at home with elderly grandparents or like my older parents that maybe have underlying, health conditions that would make them more susceptible, right? If I did, I think my lifestyle would be very different. And so there was also just kind of dealing with the wave of, social acceptance of your lifestyle and also the stigma associated with, oh my gosh, so and so got COVID. Yeah.
I think in terms of everyone isolating, I remember we shut down like on maybe the 14th or 15th. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember there was a lot of panic leading up to that point. You would hear all these reports all in the news now. It's like, oh, it's in the United States. Before, like, I remember hearing about it first in maybe early December about COVID happening like in China. So that was like, oh yeah, super far removed. We wouldn't even think about like when it would even hit here if there was that, right? So we were thinking like, oh yeah, it'll just stay over there, kind of like the Zika virus and all the other things that happened over in Asia would never come here. Um, and then all of a sudden you hear like, oh, case in California. Oh, it's multiplying. Oh, there's more. And then back then, that was before like tests were even on a consistent basis, right? So you have to imagine like numbers were in the thousands early on last year. Not early, I guess like March last year, they were in the thousands still. And then imagine number not reported. And so leading up to the point in March was like just so much anxiety in people. And then when shutdown happened, I'm in the health professional industry, so we didn't shut down because we're essential. I'm a physical therapist, you guys didn't already know. And then we just saw our numbers dwindle because it was rightfully so because people were afraid of coming in, right? Because of catching COVID. And then back then that was before the mask mandate, so we didn't know how it spread. We knew nothing. And so there's just so much fear and anxiety about not knowing what COVID was, how it affected people. We just knew that it killed a bunch of people over in Asia, and we don't know what's happening over there. We hear about this like mass chaos. And then because of that, and then there's a ton of misinformation initially, remember, about don't wear a mask because you're saving them for health professionals and blah, blah, blah. And like, you don't actually need it. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, just kidding. You should really wear a mask. And then people were like, oh, but what about this report from like back in March when you said we didn't need it? And then that was when this hot mess happened, right? And so I just remember the initial panic just being so chaotic and not people like not understanding what to do, how to deal with it. And that's how people actually eventually led to the shutdown. And there was so much anxiety and so much like negativity towards this whole situation, which doesn't help. You know what I mean? I'm not sure what it was like in Maryland or back in Florida when it first happened, but that's how I remember LA doing that. And then the official shutdown date, everything just like went dead. It was incredible. There was no traffic. There was nothing in my neighborhood. Like I lived next to like a really crazy mall, and like there would be like cars zooming by and police chases all the time. You hear like sirens going off, and then all of a sudden, nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing.
that
Yeah.
was probably the creepiest time of my life. Probably like everything was just quiet. It was like being in a movie of a post-apocalyptic movie, like we're in zombie land or something. And with all these things that were unknown, like you didn't know what's gonna happen, like you had no clue what's happening. So that's why like a lot of times like people didn't know what to do, so they're just kind of like going crazy. So whatever news that they were getting, they're just absorbing it. If it says if someone said no mask, they would believe it. If it says yes mask, they would believe it. And people just didn't know where to go for information. And I think it was chaotic. Like you would go into like once quarantine started happening, like you would try to get supplies from the grocery stores or the Home Depot, and everything was gone. Like usually I'm used to the whole hoarding supplies because of the hurricanes. So you know how to get supplies pre-planned. But this was a different level of mass hysteria, and it was intense. And I think due to this COVID and lack of toilet paper, I finally got a bidet, and that has really helped.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it really helps you not being in fear of not having toilet paper, because for like months people were like, my God, I don't have toilet paper. I don't have toilet paper. And that was like shocking. Like that was like of all things that people are afraid of, not having toilet paper was that one thing that I was always hearing.
Can I just say how first world problem that
Yeah.
was? You know,
Like,
and I
wow.
mean, just to be blatant, we're all Asians, you know, like coming from our homeland, like that would be the last thing. Right.
Yeah.
And I live, you know, I live by Costco, Walmart, like I live in a pretty central area. Yeah, the streets would be dead, but there'd be lines out, and you know, there's stores that took the initiative that they literally had huge signs that says no toilet paper. It's like, don't come in, we have no toilet paper. Like, and even in my own household, everyone was freaking out toilet paper. I was like, dude, it's just toilet paper. Like you'll be fine.
Yeah, go to the shower.
Maybe I was like, I'm stocking up on meat because I don't know how the transportation of goods is going to be with the shutdown and you know how any of that. Like I'm worried about the food. Toilet paper I can handle.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a weird thing for me. I was like, okay, that part's going to be fine. Let's prioritize and focus on a few other important things that help you to survive.
I got a question for y'all actually. So like if we could rewind in time, right? And you knew whatever date the shutdown was happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you knew about like a month beforehand. Like would you do anything different than you did? Like would you try to have like a last hurrah out at bars, or would you like stock up on supplies? Like is there anything you would have done knowing that we would be in this thing for like a year plus?
That's an interesting question. I would never have thought about that. I think, yeah, actually I would have tried to have like a massive last hurrah. Like I would go out to like all the rooftop bars here in LA and be like, yo, let's like all hang out for the last time ever. I don't know if I'm gonna see you guys in person again, because like the extrovert in me like really craves that interaction, you know, which is why like I was so glad to be able to go into work in a way, even though it was a shutdown, and because otherwise I'd just be at home, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but for me it's just so sad. I would also travel. I would go and see my family for the last time, because I haven't seen my parents in person since January of 2020, I think.
Wow.
So it's been like over a year. So I would definitely travel. I would definitely have a massive like bar gathering, go bar hopping in like the arts district in downtown LA or something, and like, you know, go find people. That's just like the extrovert.
Yeah, I think for me, like if I knew what was happening ahead of time, I would have saved a lot more money. And like the moment the stocks went down, I would have bought more stocks. You know?
Okay.
Would have bought into Zoom,
Yes.
because you know how that turned
Oh my
out.
Yeah,
gosh.
all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh man, this was 2020 hindsight. It was like, man, I could have made some good money if I actually knew ahead of time what was gonna happen.
Fair, that's fair.
That's pretty legit. I would not have thought about that. But you know, Norman, forward thinking as always.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have, I didn't know what I was going to say, but then I thought about the traveling. You know, I used to travel quite a bit, both for work prior to me, you know, working by myself, but it's just the thought of not being able to hop on a plane and the anxiety of what could happen when you travel across state lines. I remember my parents at one point, they wanted to travel. I'm like, well, what's going to happen? What if they don't let you back into the state or something, you know, or even if you go outside the country? Because at that point you have no idea. Like it sounds dramatic because they wanted to drive, which was better than flying in a sense to keep them safer. They wanted to drive to Texas to visit some family and not go out or anything, but just, they were all staying home then too, but just to see their friends, because they're like, well, we have nothing to do. COVID essentially pushed them into retirement because, you know, their job, you know, closed down and they're nail techs. And so the shops closed down. We're like, well, we'll retire. Now they're just stuck at home doing nothing. But it was right in the middle where, you know, Texas is also crazy and everywhere in the middle because we're in the South. So they would have to travel through the South. I'm like, what if the state lines close? What if X, Y, and Z happens? So I would travel. And then also alongside with Norman, I would probably look at some of those, you know, company stocks that shot through because we're all stuck at home. Yeah.
Cool. That getting stuck somewhere is a very real thing. Like I have a family member that went to go visit, you know, family in China at the time, and he's still there. Like
What?
I don't know if he's coming back.
Wait, so when was this? How long has he been there?
Probably a year now. And like, I think he might have the option to come back, but it's just like, why would he? Because like China's got their cases managed way better than the US does, right? I've heard of another friend that went to also visit family somewhere in Latin America and South America, and he hasn't come back either. So it's just like, that's
Is it
crazy.
because at this point, is it because they can't, or
I'm
and
not
how's their
sure.
okay? And are they just
No.
working remotely then?
I really have no idea.
I mean, that happened to my family actually. So my parents went to Singapore in February, and then they were stuck in Singapore from February until June because they couldn't get a flight out. Like they wanted really bad to come back to Maryland, but they just couldn't book one because they kept canceling flights. Understandably
Mm.
so, but I remember like they would be like, "Oh yeah, we're coming back like end of May." Just kidding. Got pushed back to like beginning of June, and then they kept getting postponed. And they finally be able to come back after like I think 4 or 5 months in Singapore. Granted, Singapore is a great place to be during a pandemic because it's completely safe over there right now. Everyone is just like chilling,
Super clean, yeah.
super clean, super well managed. Everyone's like basically COVID free. Like yeah, you have to wear a mask, but you can go out and like not have to worry as much. But still, like imagine not being able to come home for 4 months, right? So
Yeah, that's intense.
yeah.
That's intense. But
That happened to me, I'd probably still work because I have the option to work remote. And it's like, your girl has no other way to make money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, let's talk about that, like just the job market. So we knew when everything shut down, things kind of like imploded, right? So were you guys affected in your jobs at all in terms of doing what you usually do, or were you guys pretty okay? What was your transition like from like working in the office if you guys were doing that to working from home?
So for me, I was affected because I'm a freelancer, and I'm contracted out by other companies, and so mine was a trickle down effect. So when they got affected, I got affected. In terms of like work surroundings, I work from home like 50-50, and then I would travel to see my clients, the other half of the time. And that part changed. It was nice to kind of be home for a little while, but then again, everything just started to pile up. So for me, I was one of those small businesses that were affected, and we were trying to navigate through. And the most frustrating part, and it's not necessarily anybody to blame because everyone was just trying to figure it out as it goes, but not getting the clear communication from your government, or those that in our leadership and around like small business. What do you do? What are the resources or funds that you can go to get the help that you need to keep your business running? That was really frustrating. And like small business, SBA would hire new people to be able to help navigate that, but they also don't have the answer either. So that was really frustrating part of it. I was able to get tap into my savings and to be able to survive through a couple months, and then there was some funds that came through to help, some loans that I was able to get. But that whole process took so much. And so I really feel I don't have a brick and mortar. So that's, one big chunk of overhead that I don't have to worry about. But when you drive around, or whenever we, back then, we drive around, just go to grocery stores and you see all these brick and mortars just closed, like you can't help but feel for them, right? Because some of these are livelihoods. I'm not talking about the chains. We're talking about like the mom and pop shops and you just kept seeing the numbers rise. And so from that aspect for me, like I, in that realm, could understand and felt for. Fortunately, was able to kind of make through the year okay, but I definitely saw the downside of that.
tough, Jasmine. I can't even imagine like owning your livelihood through your business. I mean, there's a different type of freedom there, right? Like not relying and then kind of being held to the mercy of how another business is doing if you work for them. But that's a lot of pressure, right? Like you're it. How do you kind of deal with that, like on a personal level?
It was a lot of soul searching. I mean, I came from corporate. I left corporate to do my own thing, to try to make it work. And it was, I don't know if ironic's the right word, I'm blanking, but at that time, right before shutdown, I had a lot of businesses lined up where I had to, I do media work. And so I would have to go to the clients and meet with them and actually be on spot to create the work. Well, as soon as the shutdown happened, all of that got canceled. Like the bulk of my revenue that was anticipated on the books got canceled. And I also have contractors that I work with that depended on that as well. And so that was a hard reality to grasp, one for myself, but then having to communicate that down the line and say, yeah, so all of this work that we had planned coming into the new year, I'm sure a lot of people can relate. Coming into 2020, people are like, 2020, year of clarity, year of vision, whatever your word is, right? This is the year where everything falls into place. And I know like a lot of my friends were like, this is the year I get married, and all of that got canceled, right? So it was really tough. I'm fortunate that my partner, his work was not affected. He works in a small engineering firm, and they are spaced out enough to where his routine has stayed the same, and it's it's been steady. And so during that time, I leaned pretty heavily on him to try to make it by. But it was, to be blunt, it was for me living paycheck to paycheck, and it was really difficult, and seeing my savings kind of dwindle down. But what kept things in perspective for me was knowing that how much I got affected. There were just millions of others that were literally getting their homes, everything stripped away from them. And so, while I don't want to push, gratitude on anybody and be like, be grateful for what you do have and, push forward. But that really helped put things into perspective. And, you just have to keep going. And I found a means and I found a way, and things are starting to pick up now that the economy is coming back. But yeah, definitely just one of those hurdles you don't expect. But through it, I can only speak for myself, but I can see other business owners and folks coming out of it, that it just another level of resiliency, right? So.
Yeah, definitely. Like on my side, like I work for a university, and when they canceled, classes, and like that's a lot big portion of the revenue for our school, and it changed like all our budget schemes. Like we're scrambling to see what is going to happen. So like so like you know what are we gonna do? So we had to like make sure like we plan out all these things. We made more work happen. We had to do, you know, create all these different, schedules to make sure that the income was flowing correctly. And we were like trying to decide who we are gonna cut, make sure our money was gonna be flowing okay. And it was just sad seeing so many people being let go because of this COVID. It was not because their work was bad or anything. It was just because we don't have any money coming in.
Yeah.
And you just hate seeing your friends being let go, and that was probably the hardest part of COVID for the workplace, because you see your friends just getting laid off, and and then because you're getting laid, like people are getting laid off, it creates more work for everybody else, and somehow you just gotta make it you know make it happen. And that was part of the hardest part. And luckily, since I was okay, I guess I was fine. But everyone else that was above me, it was just sad that to see them go. But now we're starting, since the kids are not as afraid to go anymore, so they're coming back to the school, and now things are picking up again, and now we're hiring back again. So it just took some time for it to calm down, and then everything else is getting better. But still, it's because of this, it creates a lot more work for everybody, and it's definitely more. It's actually more work now than it was before. So yeah, work was
Yeah,
whatever.
I work pretty closely with the university, so at UF, and I remember a lot of the conversations around that time where, because the university depends so much, a big bulk for, I would say most universities is dormitories, right? And now given the option that, you could be at home, or as a student, you could remain home, take classes online. They're not staying in the dorms. And this is like a huge amount of revenue that's coming down the pipeline for, if you consider all the workers that fall under, not even talking about like professors and teachers, because they're still leading their classes, but you're talking about like maintenance workers, technical building, plantation workers around the campus, and all of that just goes on a pause. And you take a look around it's that, going back to that eerie feeling of, empty roads, right? Where if we remember back to college times when during the holidays and campus is just dead, it just stands still. I remember driving by UF and I'm like, man, what month are we in? What is it? Yeah. And it's just, it's like a somber, it was definitely a somber feeling, but you could just feel it in the air, like that, the tension of everything that's happening around.
Wow, I never even considered all of the impact at universities. I'm in touch with some college students through my sorority, and I know they had to adjust a lot of their social activities and make them virtual, which it's so crazy how I feel like this generation is so quick to adapt to virtual pieces, where I feel like if we had to try this, a couple generations ago, it would not have gone as well.
Right.
Or it wouldn't even be a possibility. Like, imagine if we had to go through this without the existence of the internet and cell phones. Like, what would our mental health be like then if we were just shut inside without the luxuries that we do have? At least even in a first world space, right? I'm sure some parts of the world don't have the luxuries that we have here too. But thank you for sharing that piece around the universities too, because that made me reflect on how many other spaces in the world that are normally running and operating that require people to operate that suddenly find themselves, not working because these institutions or these organizations have to cut costs because people are just not spending money. And so that then they can't afford to pay these people. But some of these people rely on these jobs for a living. Like, that's insane. It makes me feel so grateful for my situation, like financially and employment wise.
Yeah, there was a number that was thrown around, or a couple numbers actually, because when people hear public institution, they think that it's heavily funded by both state and federal funds. But I remember talking to one of the executives that works on like as an affiliation of UF, and he's like, yeah, we do get some funding, but around 12%. So if you consider, and then also around that time when they were talking about what revenue drop looks like in terms of dormitory living costs alone, and it was about 40% of their operating. So if you consider that, right, and I mean, again, if you give students, they're not making it mandatory that you have to be on campus. And UF is one of those universities where, as a freshman, you are not mandated to be in a dorm. So they couldn't mandate you to pay for an empty space anyways. So parents are like, yeah, stay home, because why would you, there's no need for you to go there, and we save the money. And so everything was just empty. And if you also think about, the cafeterias, and a lot of first and second year students, they have the meal plans, and that's all funded by, not funded, but that's all through the university predominantly. And so all of those meal plans and those costs went away. Everything just went away. So it's crazy to think of such a large institution, and UF is, we're now like top 6, Norman, I don't know.
Yeah, like
public
university,
but still, there's such a powerful institution could just be brought to their knees by something like this. And you're right, it's it almost, with the pandemic happening during this time, there is grace in the fact that people can still operate, because like you said, when we were in college, this was probably not possible, right? When we were in college, we were still having like text limits. You reach your 200 text limit for the month, you can't text no more. Like what would you do? Just pause your education. And I think it was funny for me to realize as an adult, I was like, well, that's nice. I can just not walk to class in the Florida heat and sweat my butt off, and I can just be in my room and take my classes. But there is that socialization that gets stripped from you. And if we put ourselves back into the shoes then, and all the things that we did to interact with, even as an introvert like myself, to interact with people, to meet people, the clubs, going out, all of that time period, in a way you can say that they can pick that up later, but also that they can't. Right. And so, coming out of this, I've been reading a lot of articles and listening to a lot of podcasts about how there's going to be a tremendous spike in mental health, not just for college students, but for younger students from like K through 12, where, how does that interaction happen during like the peak of their socialization growth? So.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because like if this happened back in the day, like Zoom wasn't around, group meetings wasn't around, like how were we gonna do all this stuff? Like it's kind of, I think, not to say anything, but it kind of came at a good time, because if it came like 10 years ago, I'm not sure how we would have functioned. Do you guys have any ideas how we would have functioned if this happened 10 years ago, without Zoom, without these group, video conferencing? Because it was only like, I think back in the day, it was only like one-on-one maybe. Like we didn't have all these chats, these team chats. Like I don't know. Like the infrastructure was a lot capable than it is now. Like it's kind of scary to think about.
I wonder if we would have been just strictly shut down more because you don't have the capabilities.
Yeah, I think so.
Or the alternative is like to keep going and then have the numbers climb up even more. So I don't know.
I was thinking more alternative, Jasmine. Like when you think about America being a capitalist economy here, like a lot of businesses are able to function because of the internet, because of all of these technological advances, right? If we didn't have those, and I know some companies are pushing employees to return back to the office because they really value the human connection, even though people are terrified of the human connection due to COVID, right? No matter what the safety precautions you might put in place, everybody has their own comfort levels. But just thinking about the companies that are pushing people to go back to the office now, if we didn't have all of these means to work virtually, I think some of these offices and organizations would push people to go into the office where they can work, because that's what drives our country, honestly.
Money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys have is there anything that you guys can share that really stands out for you for this, the experience of COVID, the pandemic, how it's affected you and or your family? Is there anything, kind of one thing? Hey, Daphne. I just posed a new question and asking the group, do you guys have any predominant memory or just incident situation throughout this pandemic that you want to share?
Yeah, actually, I have one. Like I started a relationship, basically a long distance relationship, basically in the beginning of COVID, like in March, March, 18th, around there. So and we were planning on, visiting each other like every so often, like every month. But, all of this got completely cut into like maybe we saw each other maybe like 3 times throughout the whole year. And that was really hard for both of us, because because it's a new relationship, you need that time together. And especially because it's long distance, you really need that time to be together, and it was just really hard for both of us. But and because of COVID, it just but it also gave us time to make sure we are focus on each other more. So we're trying to decide on ways to interact differently. Like we play games now online. We use the Zoom, and we try to interact with our friends, with both of our friends groups using games. So in a way, this made us think about new ways to interact with each other. So it's kind of somehow it's human, like the human nature. It's kind of interesting that it makes something happen out of nothing, right? It's like the what's it called, the human resolve, I guess, to make things just work.
It forces you to get creative.
Yeah. So it kind of turned a bad thing into a okay thing.
I didn't realize your relationship started during COVID, Norman. I thought it was like earlier. Oh my goodness, that is so hard.
I know.
Oh.
But it's okay now. It's getting okay.
That's good.
The light at the end of the tunnel is approaching.
Soon, hopefully.
My most standout memory was the time that I hopped on a live stream with Daphne, not having met her. And we talked about dating during COVID because we both were like, yo, we're on a mission. I don't know if you were like this, Daphne, but I was on a mission to find myself a man. And we were just like, how? Like, we're not supposed to be social with other people. Connection is discouraged. And, just kind of piggybacking off of that, the formation of SAV, like, I don't think if COVID hadn't happened, we would not be here today. And just having met you all and having this space to share perspectives and hear your very poignant perspectives, maybe hopefully having new segments, hint, Jasmine, on perspectives.
Pending.
Yes, Jasmine.
It's just been a really great experience for me, and also encourage reflection in a time where we're discouraging physical connection. But I feel like in order to replace that, I made a lot of virtual connections that I wouldn't have made otherwise. So thank you all for that.
No, thank you.
Yeah. And we still haven't met in person,
I believe that.
It's great. I mean, so you guys have heard me call you guys, we joked at the beginning, for those who, I don't know if we've talked about this from the beginning, we were trying to figure out our acronym, right? SAV, and we were like savers. It's like, no one wants to call us savers, and we don't want to be put out there like that. But I genuinely feel that, you guys have been the light for me, because during that time, like both with my business, both with, I had an incident at home with my roommates where it just got really bad. And again, there's one being in your head, but then like being stuck in the house and all of these things, in a very good way. Connecting with you all was just this great escape, is like if you were looking forward to like a vacation or something, and really because we're all from so many different parts of the country, literally coast to coast, just getting the perspectives from each of you and just talking. It was genuinely so enlightening, and one of, if not the best thing that came out of the pandemic. Because you're right, Tiff, I don't know that this would have came about outside of that.
I always forget that we started during the pandemic, guys. Like, that's completely mind-blowing, because if you guys don't know our audience, none of us have met in person yet, except for like all of us in the same area. So we have people from like LA, Florida, DC, Ohio, and then like none of us have actually met in person, which is remarkable. And like Tiff, I do remember meeting you online first, and we would chat, and our first conversation lasted like 2.5 hours. Do you remember that? And this was before our live stream. And so like thinking about how that happened and how that started is insane, because on a regular day, we wouldn't be this attached to our computers on a digital platform. If you think about it, right? I know that we were forced to do that. Like, that's definitely one of my favorite memories, or one of the memories that does stick out, is like getting roped in by one of our friends, Sean. Shout out to Sean for bringing us all together. Best. But that was just an incredible random thing. Because I'm going to be honest, when like Sean asked me to like facilitate discussions with like for his friend, I was like, what does that even mean? okay. And so I talked to Brian. I remember him like asking him, and he was like, yeah, do you know what we're actually doing? I was like, honestly, I have no idea. He was like, oh, okay, well, let me explain. And then so I just seeing it evolve from like an initial dating channel to
Yeah.
like what Sav is today. It was such a 180. And I think it's been something completely incredible that I never thought I would step into. So thank you, COVID-19, for bringing Sav together. That is one amazing thing that came out of this pandemic for all of us, if I do say so myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should see our chats, guys. We are on. So you know how Facebook chats have you usually like they'll die out after like a certain amount of time, right?
Mm.
Ours has been going and
For like a
going,
whole
Whole year.
year.
going. Yeah, it never
Yeah.
stops.
Yeah.
And like we have some amazing conversations, which is why we're leading to our next segment with Jasmine. Ask Jasmine on this channel.
Yeah.
It was very interesting because before that, so Brian, I, and Norman, so we have met in person in college, but I hadn't talked to Brian since literally I went through my Facebook thread, and what you were saying, Daphne, it dies off. The last interaction I had with him prior to Sav was like 2018, like early 2018. And I saw him promoting the dating channel, and I, for whatever reason or another, I think it might have just me being stuck at home and, just mulling in my head. I'm like, have you ever thought about using your reach and your platform to talk about more, maybe mental health or other things around Asian Americans? And he's like, huh. And then next thing I knew, he dropped me into the Facebook thread with you all. And a year later, we're still chatting it up. And was that first conversation? I don't know if it was just me, but I felt like everyone just really clicked. You guys were probably talking way before that, but I came in and it just flowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Let me.
It's like yeah.
Let me bring you behind the curtains a little bit how things started, right? So like me and Brian, like we were talking about dating lives, like how frustrated things were with being dating, and we're like, oh, maybe we can help other guys who are Asian figure out how to get girls or how to talk to girls. Like we're trying to be like the next Asian Hitch. Like so that was the idea that we had in our heads. So let's try to bring out some kind of advice for all the single guys that are out there or ladies, and that was what happened. Like we're just trying to get girls' attention, I guess, right? So that was like literally the first seeds in our minds. Like, oh, that's how do we try to get dates and how to meet
just
girls.
Out here trying to get girls.
How get girls. And that was the original idea. Like the first thing that brought to our heads. That was the whole point, was to try and get girls, right?
Norman, what's hilarious though is like technically you did get girls, just not in the way that you think.
Right. It was very interesting, but yeah, that was the whole idea, and now it's became much more than just dating, and I'm definitely glad for that.
That's hilarious. I just remember just like transitioning from the dating platform into like what we are now, and that was like a really lengthy talk that we had discussed. But then it's kind of evolved into mental health, career development, identity stuff, which is amazing. And I think the thing about COVID is that I remember this is a really pivotal period of time where we had a ton of history just thrown out there. Remember, so COVID is one of them. COVID is like the thing that's going to change the history books. Black Lives Matter, right? And now the Asian American violence coming to light, which is insane. No one had ever thought about that. But these are all really pivotal moments in our history. And I think that's something that was definitely stand out about last year, was that all of this stuff, I mean, yeah, there was like the great things of meeting people online, but there's also the seriousness of like what's happening in our country. And also now worldwide too, it's kind of spread out to this like worldwide movement. All of that was brought to light. So it's good and it's bad in the way that good because now we know about it, now we can address it, but bad because it was just so much chaos and a lot of pain that was put out there too. I don't know how you guys felt about that transition from like just coronavirus into like this whole like movement of on the social, political, economic level. Looking back now, we have this to think about, right? We have the channel that has that history where we address that along the way, and then we're still going to be addressing things that are going to come throughout the next year. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what were your experiences during those times?
Your note there about us living through a piece of history is so, it's spot on. The governor in Maryland recently declared March 5th as the COVID-19 Day of Remembrance to acknowledge all the American lives that have been lost, to COVID. I mean, I don't know how this will be recognized moving forward, but in addition to the positive experiences that we shared, I know there are a lot of people that are grieving, that have experienced loss, and yeah, it's definitely been hard. Not even just on a mental health level, and having our inconveniences or having our conveniences inconvenienced. Right? It's like people have lost members of their community, of their family.
Yeah, that when you said there's a Remembrance Day, like I just got chills. It was, I think it's just, if in reflection, looking back, in the beginning, it seemed so far and wide that it was that, not that we were immune to it because, we're in a first world country, but that it's happening over there, it's not here. And then as the months moved on, it got closer and it got closer and it got closer. I remembered my friend's, his girlfriend's mom had gotten it from work, and she passed in like a day, like 24, 48 hours. Healthy, there were so many cases with so many varying conditions that you couldn't pinpoint it, but it just kept getting closer. And for me, one of the things that I want to share quickly is, like, so 2 weeks ago, my uncle passed because of COVID. And he's not a blood uncle, but couldn't be any closer, right? And leading up to that, it was actually, I didn't share this with you guys because it was just one of those things you go through by yourself. But the last monthly meeting we had, as soon as we got off that call, I got a call that he was in ICU, non-responsive. And from that point on until now, it was about 2 to 3 Zoom calls between our family nationwide with him just in bed. And the nurses have been great. Like, it was always like guest relations. And every time I come on, I'm thinking, wow, that's another responsibility for the nurses to have to do above taking care and making sure that everything goes right with, IVs and tubes and all of that. But I want to speak a little bit on those who have experienced visiting, loved ones in that condition through a Zoom call. And it's not just a one-on-one. I'm talking, we had family from like California all the way to New York, Canada, everywhere. And the first call was probably the heaviest because you didn't know what to expect. Nobody knew what to expect. It was like their first call. And you jump on and there's a mix of, if you can imagine, all of us right now have used Zoom, and there's always perhaps maybe that one person on the call who's like, hello, can you hear me? You can't hear me? Okay, what do I do? What do I click? Okay, and now imagine that with a age group of 60 or above, and Asians, who weren't born here and who don't know technology. So like, what? Huh? And you've got people on FaceTime, they're like, hello, and you see their ear. And so there's a navigation between, okay, everyone mute, but nobody knows, 75% of the people on the call don't know where the mute button is. And then on the other spectrum of it is just hysterical crying, right? And you cannot pinpoint your emotion. It's like, do I cry? Do I maybe sort of laugh because this person, can't figure out Zoom? Not that it's to any of their fault, but it was such a spectrum of emotion. And that first call was particularly hard because it was sort of positioned to be a potential like last words kind of call, because he was about to go into a procedure where you don't know what the outcome was going to be. But as everyone was kind of going down the line, you know, there's a mix of saying your last words, but also encouragement, where typically you would be able to, you know, in our case, and this is family in Houston, we would have flown there, probably stayed there a couple, you know, for however long it was, go into the hospital and have that one-on-one time. You're living through every single person in the family's one-on-one moment. And you know, I think we collectively, up until the point where he passed, probably 15 or so calls. And you kept hearing all these stories. People started getting a little bit more comfortable with the situation. Okay, here's another Zoom call. We're grateful that we get to have another one. He's looking better. People are in a little bit lighter spirits, although there's still a handful that just cannot get past their pain to be able to talk. And there's people talking, you know, regaling on stories about, you know, hey, remember that one time? And remember you promised, you know, you owe me this promise. You said you're going to do this, so you have to get well, you have to get better. And I just kept thinking in my head, you know, how, and at the same time thinking selfishly in my head, I'm like, you got to make it through. You got to like make it to my wedding one day. Like you promised me. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but it was so hard trying to, literally a roller coaster of emotions, because you would hear one story and it was such a genuinely, you know, memorable and light memory of this person and their time together. And you remember that of yourself and them, and you have a moment of hope. And then also remember on the end of the person in the ICU, you're hearing all these beeps. So anything that goes off, it's like, is it okay? Like what is happening? It's hard to really put into words to describe it. And I'm sure for those who have gone through it, it's unlike anything. It's a different traumatic experience. It really is. I wouldn't wish that experience on like my worst enemy. Like it takes this whole toll out of you, where afterwards, like I literally felt like, and this is not to demean people who have been through depression, but you just sit there and you're like, what do we do from here? You know? And this was, you know, I call my uncle because he fought in the war with my dad and in the Vietnam War, and a really great philanthropic person. He helped a lot of our family get here, and when they got here, helped them with the right funds. But to know that, I think one of the things that nailed it in too is to know that they could survive war, but not this, was it just, that's when it hit the closest to home to me. And then I started getting frustrated when I seen people out there just like partying it up, especially in Florida. You know, all the bars were packed and everything. I'm like, oh, that I hit my mental peak at that point, and I just got so angry at everybody and everything, and I just shut down. But I know that there's a lot of people. I mean, what was the number? 400, 500?
I think it's like 500 something already.
You know, that number, if you imagine, and there was something too where midway where people were like, well, you know, once it hits a certain number of casualties and deaths, people just stop caring, because you just
get numb.
Yeah, you get numb to it. But I'm just now imagining through that time period, imagining all these people who are having to go through that process, like loved ones saying goodbye like this, like we are right now talking, and not being able to touch, not being able to, that trauma stays with you forever. But yeah, that's will probably be the most memorable coming out of this pandemic for me. And then, you know, like we talked earlier, the on the other spectrum of that memorable is the accumulation of us coming together. So there was light, there was dark, and, you know, you kind of have to find a balance in between to be grateful for things the way that they happen and such.
It's life.
Oh, dang, girl. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I remember when you were just talking about it with us over chat. That was hard. And seeing and hearing you now, it's like it's heartbreaking because this is not just a solo experience that you're going to experience on your own. Your family went through this with you. You saw your family go through this, right? And there's a massive amount of people who have lost their loved ones just the way you have. And so you are probably not alone in this experience. You're right. And it's heartbreaking because you're right. After like 500K, you're like, oh, it's just another like death. It's another statistic. But you realize that these are people, and people have families, and people have daughters, and people have sons, grandsons, granddaughters, and you forget the emotional tie, and you forget that these are human, right? And so it's just another reminder of how precious life is and of how precious it is that we are currently in the situation where we're safe. Because honestly, it's a gift. And I think we always forget about how important it is to treasure life on its own because we take it for granted, right? Because we miss going back to the way things were and things like that. But in reality, this is a lot harder than just going back to the way we were before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Can't hear you, Tiff.
Yeah, it's definitely like been crazy, like you see a lot of the vaccines coming back. The vaccines is starting to roll out a little more, and I think hopefully our loved ones are beginning to get the vaccines, hopefully, and hopefully it's good. How are you doing?
So speaking of the vaccine, Daphne, I know you and Brian both, but you here with us. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, that was a weird day. I was like sitting there. I remember waking up. So I got the vaccine officially, both doses done by February 4th. The first dose was like in January. And so thank God I was even able to get that opportunity because as a health professional, you're still trying to get these doses and it's still really hard to get an appointment. But I remember that day that I got it, I woke up in the morning and I was like, I'm getting vaccinated for a potential very deadly virus. And I don't know how to feel about this because one, the vaccine is like, it's new technology, technically. But this technology has been in development for the past decade. And so it's completely safe. It won't affect your body adversely, except for, you hear the side effects. And so it was crazy because you went there. I remember it was like within the first couple of weeks of vaccine rollout starting. And then it was just chaos because you go to the tent and like people are lined up outside 6 feet apart. My appointment was at 8 a.m. and we got there at 7:30 and there's already a line that's like 10, 15 minutes longer than it was supposed to. I remember just feeling like hope, but also just terror just because you don't know. This is like a whole new thing. You know what I mean? And like at the same time, you have to wonder like, what brought us to this point, when I got in line to get the vaccine, it was just like a very like, it's just a shot. It's like literally like a flu vaccine in your arm. It was just very kind of nonchalant. You're like, okay, here's a vaccine. Here are the possible side effects, just in case you need it, take a Tylenol. If your arm is sore, normal. Okay, here you go. In and out, and then out you go. And it was kind of like, it's like this juxtaposition between like my feelings of like anxiety and also just like this like heightened state to like this like, oh, it's done. Okay. And then like waking up the next, that's it. You're like, huh, all that build up for just like that shot. Cool. So I wake up the next morning. My arm was in so much pain though, guys. Like I remember like waking up my alarm to get my alarm. I was like trying to lift it off my bed. And I like looked at it. I was like, ah, and I literally did an audible scream. But I think getting the vaccine and being able, just realizing the opportunity that to like be immune or have some sort of immunity to this virus and not being doomed to the fact that like you might get terrible symptoms and be hospital bedridden. It was a burden lifted off my shoulders. Like I don't think I felt in a long time. But it's also like the fear of like, okay, we don't know what the long-term effects are of this vaccine. We don't know how long I have immunity for, so I'm going to treasure it while I have it. So yeah, that was an interesting experience. And the second shot, I got it on the 4th. And then I was texting you guys, but like I died the next day, like the next 12 hours, which was like fever, chills, body aches. And it was like the worst I've ever felt before. Turning around in bed was painful. Like even having blankets touch my skin, which is so sensitive. ibuprofen didn't work. Also because, to be fair, I took expired ibuprofen, I realized, so that might be why. But but it didn't bring the temp down. But I think it was kind of it was just like a fraction of symptoms that you would have felt when you had COVID. And I was like, I don't want the full thing. If this is how bad it hurts with just the vaccine, like I am good and I'm grateful. And I think to be able to be fully vaccinated and say that out loud is still somewhat surprising, I think, for me. And to just realize that all that fear up to now is still present, but it's not going to affect me now. It's not be more like focused on my family and friends, you know? So guys, if you are going to get your vaccine, this is a PSA, get your vaccine, because that way you can see your family, see your friends, and your fans are going to be protected, you know? And like AMC, the American Medical Board just put out a statement about the myths of the vaccine. I can link it down below and you can take a read, but it's showing some really good progress to going back to normal, being mask-free around your friends and family who have been vaccinated. And with that hope, we can move on. You know what I mean? This will not be something that will stay around forever. Thankfully, there's always progress being made in science and a lot of tech being developed to be able to get over things like this and to conquer this pandemic. But the thing is, it's a process that we can't do alone. And that's why it requires community. And community now is more than just your immediate friends. Community is your world around you, right? Clearly, as throughout the entire pandemic, you saw community is like everyone standing behind the Black Lives Matter movement, everyone standing behind the Asian American movement that's happening now. That's community. And so to be able to have that broad spectrum view is super important to not forget that, because it's not just you and it's not just your immediate family, but it's everyone.
Right.
So, yeah.
And y'all, to Daphne's credit, this girl was back working out in like a week. So, you know.
Oh man, I had to get something to get out of bed, girl. Like I was losing my gains and strength real quick. I was like, okay, so get me a barbell.
Our bodies are such. Can you guys hear me yet?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like our bodies are so amazing, and like they just work without us even thinking or telling it to work. So you know, the fact that you weren't feeling so hot, Daphne, and that was really your body kind of like at war, battle within you, right? Making sure that you have the antibodies developed and everything, like that actually means the vaccine's working. And so, yeah, so grateful for the ability to be in our bodies, so that we can take care of our bodies. And yeah, hopefully there is that light. You guys can see that light at the end of the tunnel too.
Yeah. I mean, just like a quick note, so you guys don't freak out about the vaccine. Second dose might be terrible for you, but if it is, it only lasts for 12 hours and it's like night and day. Like all of a sudden you're fine again. And like, yeah, you're tired, but it's like all of your symptoms just disappear. And so don't be afraid to get it. All you need is some rest, water, some good noodles and soup if you do enjoy those kinds of foods, and you'll be just fine. So
if you have concerns and you need answers, ask a healthcare professional. Don't just go on Google and go crazy.
Don't go on Facebook.
Don't go on Facebook. Don't go on any of that stuff. Ask your healthcare professional. And because it's, you know, based on your condition and based on everything else, they're going to have different answers. So you can't just blindly look at a default article and be like, oh, I can't do this. You know, it's,
and
take the right precautions. Yeah.
Yes, and definitely like go to the government websites. You know, they're gonna have, you know, all the things that are listed for you to, you know, find. And if you need like a, you know, an appointment, they can, you know, pre-register you, so you're in line already. You know, you just put your name, your email, and then you're good to go. You know, you say if you're part of the vulnerable groups, and you're in line for the vaccine. So it's very easy. You know, just try it out. You know. Keep on wearing your masks while you're out there. You know, it's very important. I think from the beginning to now, I think we've discovered that masks are actually very important and not just something that's gonna, you know, not do anything. It actually does something. You know, so just I think definitely needs to
science.
It works. It works. You know, you just need to give it some time and you know, just let things, you know, work.
And even after this pandemic, wash your hands.
Yes. Yes. If you're
Practice
sick,
good hygiene
if you're sick, wash
because
your hands.
even if you're not sick, just wash your hands all the time.
I mean,
Just get
seriously
clean.
though.
Stations, grocery stores, like
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
like this whole year I didn't get the cold, I didn't get the flu. You know, like it's all because
Knocking
we
on
all-
wood for you, Norman.
Yes, we all had our masks on. When you were sick, you had your mask on, and you weren't spreading germs around. You know, I think it's something to think about in the future. You know,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think we have blown past our time for today. But
Absolutely.
it was a good time. You
It
know,
was
with
good.
everybody. Good reflections about our 1 year surviving this ordeal. You know, so
I cannot believe it's a full year. So, on that note, any last thoughts, y'all? Other than wear your mask.
stay
Just
safe.
some wrap up thoughts.
Stay safe.
Wear your mask. Stay
Get the
safe.
get that
Practice social
vaccine.
distancing. Get
Yes.
your
Now,
vaccine.
stay healthy. You know, if anything out of this too, health is number one,
Yes.
right? Health, family, all of that, community. Just focus on the things that matter. Take care of your health. Take care of each other. Do what you're supposed to do. Listen to science. Science is really important. You know,
It's proven.
it has been proven, and just be kind.
Yes.
Probably the last thing.
Empathy.
Just be nice to people.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, I can hear you now.
I wanted to say be proud that you made it. And maybe, you didn't feel like you had any positive experiences or it was really rough this past year. But the very fact that you made it here, be proud of yourself for that.
Amen, girl. Thank you for saying that because everyone has survived to this far. And the fact that you're alive is a miracle. Every day is like that. You never know what's going to happen next. So let's be thankful for what we have today and thankful for your community around you. And then on that note, we are going to wrap up this live stream. Thank you guys so much for listening to our ramblings for the past hour. Hopefully y'all learned something or you guys have questions for us. Feel free to leave a comment down below. We'll be happy to answer. Again, if you haven't hit that already, hit that like, subscribe button so you don't miss any more musings like this because we got more where this came from, guys. So guys, have a wonderful Saturday. Enjoy the weekend. Get outside, please. Get some fresh air. And as always, stay safe. We love y'all.
Bye.
Bye. Till next time.
We good?
Yes, we are good.